So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is your fellow YouTuber coming to you on the internet. So, what are we going to do today? Well, today we are going to study media. This is hopefully the start of a series of videos that will be covering the very basics of the media industry. More specifically, film. However, I believe that you can. This is not just useful for film; it's useful for if you want to be a journalist as well. This will most likely be some of the things that you will be needing to know. So, anyway, today we're going to start off with categories. Then we're going to go into narrative and representation. Maybe not exactly in that order, but we will definitely start off with categories first, as I feel that that is the easiest part of the video that we're going to do. So, categories. What exactly is categories? Well, it's basically what kind of film it covers, what kind of film you're purchasing. So, the medium, for example, is more or less the format that you're buying it in. Film, DVD, video. If you're watching it on television, it will obviously be a TV film. Could be. Forget about a television one. More specifically, it's to do with whether it's film as in the old materials that they used to use in the Super 8 films. If you don't know what Super 8 is, well, you can look it up on the internet. I'm not going to go into it because I don't want to get sidetracked, but don't want to go off track. But anyway, film is just an old material they used to use for the old-fashioned cameras in cinemas mostly, so that's nothing to do with. It's nothing that you really need to know now. Some cinemas still use it, I think, but it's pretty much irrelevant in the home video industry, so it's not relevant anymore. Anyway. DVD, we all know what DVD is. We probably have some video. Well, video is the most simple thing, really. We watch it when we're on YouTube and stuff, so it's that kind of format. Anyway, form. This doesn't just apply for films. This applies for many other things. Is it a series? Is it a magazine? Is it a one-off program? That's a good example. That's basically what form is. I don't really even need to explain that because it's super easy to know. Anyway, genre. Genre. Well, people probably already know this, but for those of you who are very, very, very new to this industry, genre is more or less covers how could I put this? It covers what kind of atmosphere is the film going to have? That's it, really. What it is what kind of atmosphere, what kind of story is it going to have. It can be a documentary, so it can affect the purpose can affect the genre as well, so it could have something to do with the purpose. So a documentary obviously can have many atmospheres depending what the documentary is about, but mostly documentaries tend tend to have the purpose of informing somebody, informing the audience on whatever it is, whether it's a historical event, mostly historical event, or just scientific facts. I recently watched a documentary about the life of Nikola Tesla, so that's a good example. That I could use that as an example. It tells you about his inventions, roughly how they work, and it tells you about his life as well. So that's a documentary. Soap opera. Well, anybody who's, we all know what soap operas are. I'm just trying to dumb things down for people who don't. I'm trying not to use very fancy words. So it's basically a dramatic series. Usually, that's what soap operas are. It's like a TV show that's dramatic. One that's very popular is Coronation Street, and there's EastEnders, there's Emmerdale. They're very popular in Britain. Another, I don't know any Spanish ones, but I believe Spain does have quite a fame for making soap operas as well. So that's other genres is a drama, horror, the news as well. Wait, did I say horror correctly? Horror, horror films. Yeah. Sorry, it's just that I have an unusual way of pronouncing words sometimes, so bear with me. Anyway, we all know what genre is. If you don't know what genre is, have you ever seen a film? That's my question to those who don't know what genre is. Tone, anyway. Tone is similar to genre, except for it's more to do, it again impacts the atmosphere a little bit more. It invokes certain emotions in your head. It can make you feel either, if it's a horror, if it's a scary tone can make you feel nervous. Can tell you, wow, this film is a little bit creepy, a little bit scary. That's an amusing tone is usually in a comedy. It makes you laugh a little bit. Dramatic tones can make you feel sad. Tragic tones can make you cry. That's what tone is. Style is a bit of it's a bit of an enigma, I think. In my opinion, is oddly similar to genre. I really don't know why this is included here in the script, but I will explain it to you. Is what's the film going to be like in terms of what example could I use? Oh, a good example is the Blair Witch Project. If you've ever seen the Blair Witch Project, the Blair Witch Project, the original one, the 1990s Blair Witch Project film, it's a horror film. However, when watching the horror film, it is filmed as if it's a documentary. Obviously, we all know it's not a documentary, it's all fictional. but it is given that sort of the way, you know, the camera quality that they use, the way they talk, the way they interact with the camera, and the way they just interact with their environment. It's kind of like it's a documentary, and they pretend that it's a documentary in the film. So that's kind of to do with the style more than the actual genre itself. It's more to do with style. Obviously genre is horror, thriller. Yeah, it can be a thriller film, I guess. I would say, in my opinion, it's more of a thriller than a horror film, because it's not scary in the sense that a horror film is. Horror films are, for example, The Woman in Black. I think I'd say it's a thriller. I'd say that for me, the Blair Witch Project is more of a thriller, but you can count it as a horror. You know, I'll give it the benefit of the doubt in this case. But that's, you know, from that you can understand what kind of style it is. So it's basically what I like to call the fake genre of the film. When a film sort of pretends to be of a certain genre, but in reality isn't. That's what I like to call it. Interpret that how you like to interpret it, but that's how I like to understand that the style is. It's when the film creatively pretends to be another genre when it openly knows that it's not that certain genre, it's a different genre. So that I'm pretty sure that's what style is. I've never really I've studied media in the past, and I've never had to use style in any of my work, so I don't know why it's here in the script. Fantasy, there's fantasy style as well, adventure. You understand where I'm trying to go with this. So let's get on to purpose. Purpose can be what's the intention of the media text itself. Media text means well, the product given to you by the media, whether it's a newspaper, film, magazine, you get the gist. Anyway, what is the purpose? Is it to amuse, to make you happy? You know, is it to inform? Like the news, for example, the news is to inform. Is it to educate? Like what would be a great example? Like an educational book, for example. You get plenty of educational books. People have been using educational books for thousands of years, probably. So thousands, millions. I'm going off the rails, but you understand what I'm trying to go with here. To entertain. A magazine can be to entertain as well. So yeah, so that's what I'm trying to basically say when it comes to purpose. That's categories now. So we are now going to do narrative. With narrative, we will start off quickly with prop theory, which is, well, prop theory is basically the conventional characters that appear in many films, really. Almost every film in these cases. It's almost every film. The prop theory is usually only applicable to horror films, action films, fantasy films, fairy tales as well. Well, that's not a genre, that's a type of book, but as a book genre more specifically, but in films, fantasy, I already mentioned action films, so spy films. It's a very great example. Spy films. It's not, although spy films is not exactly a genre, it's just a style of film, but you get where I'm going. Hopefully you get where I'm going here. The prop theory covers the conventional or the typical characters that you would find in those kind of films. So there's the hero, who is usually the character who is sent on a quest to save the day, or to save a specific person. You know, in the case of fantasy films, it's a princess. The villain is usually the character who is against the hero and blocks the hero from progressing in the quest. Basically the anti-hero. Those two, in the hero and the villain, they're both binary opposites. Well, that's just a bit of information that you could use for your exam or for your teacher. It's a very useful bit of information. I don't see why, but teachers like when especially media teachers do like when students know that kind of stuff. So the donor is usually similar to a companion, not exactly. It's a character who in almost mostly could be horror as well. Could be horror and or fantasy films. Mostly horror and fantasy films. The donor is a character who gives with the intention of aiding the hero, of helping the hero, gives the hero magical object. What good examples could I use? I'm not really a person who watches many fantasy films. However, the Harry Potter franchise, I'm pretty sure, has plenty of whoever gives Harry the wand. I believe that was John Hurt. I think whatever character he played again, but the character in Harry Potter who gives, even though practically Harry Potter needs the wand to get into Hogwarts, you get where I'm going at. He gives Harry Potter the wand, so he counts as the donor in the film. The dispatcher is usually the person who sends the main character on the quest. In this case, the dispatcher in the Harry Potter films will be, you could say, Dumbledore. I mean, I think it's Dumbledore. It could be Dumbledore, or if you've seen The Woman in Black, if you've seen The Woman in Black, it will be the boss in the lawyer's firm. In The Woman in Black, it's to do with the character who, it's to do with this guy who has a job. He's a lawyer basically, and his boss sends him to do some stuff. We'll go into the Woman in Black later on. But anyway, that's what the dispatcher is. It's the person who sends the hero on the quest The messenger is usually the person who passes the order from the dispatcher to the hero, so allows the hero to know that the dispatcher has told him to do this. The false hero is the person who pretends to be the hero, who pretends that it's to do the hero, but what he does is he disrupts what the like the progress of the hero. He doesn't really disrupt. I would say he diverts the hero from his quest. In The Woman in Black, this would be Mr. Daly, who often, although sympathizes with the hero, often doesn't believe that what the hero is trying to do is right, and thinks that the hero is delusional and tries to tell the hero to stop doing what he's doing. You'll understand what I mean when I go deeper into The Woman in Black in this video, maybe even in the later videos as well. I'll try not to focus on The Woman in Black too much for copyright reasons. But anyway, the helper. For this, I can use an example which many billions of examples, but the helper is usually the companion of the hero. I will use Doctor Who as an example because it's hugely famous for having very important companions. So, for example, for people who have been watching the new series of Doctor Who, the helpers in the series are the four is the I can't remember the exact names because they're just there's Graham, the father, the old man, well, the older person, the adult basically, and then there's the two youngsters as well, if I'm correct. Yeah, there's the father, and then there's the policewoman, and then there's the stepson of the father. Yes, so it's not the father, it's a stepfather. Yeah, there's a stepfather, there's a stepson, and then there's the policewoman, and then obviously there's the hero, which is the doctor in this series. But you get what companion is now. Anyway, princess is the character. It's usually the damsel in distress, the character who needs saving. The best example that I can use in this case is Sleeping Beauty. Sleeping Beauty. So, in the Sleeping Beauty, if you've heard of that fairy tale, if you've seen any of the cartoons and stuff, it's pretty much a film where the princess gets put to sleep by some very bad by a very bad witch, and then the prince, or the person who's in love with the princess, saves her by kissing her, and she when I say saves her, I mean causes her to wake up again. So yes, so that's what the the princess is a person who needs saving. The father in prop theory is usually can be the dispatcher. However, is never the person to actually give the message. Is never the person to actually make sure that the hero receives the message. That's the messenger's job. But in this case, the dispatcher can also be the father. But mainly the father is the person who gives the reward to the hero. In the fairy tales, the reward tends to be the princess itself. So the father gives permission for the hero to fall in love or marry the princess. Either that, or the person or the father gives the hero some money or another reward apart from the love of the princess herself. So yeah, you get what I'm trying to say. Yeah, so I'll continue. That's prop theory for you. That's prop theory. Narrative structures. Well, narrative structures is mainly to do with the way in which the story is told to you. The order in which the story is told to you. So, for example, there's the depends how you see it. There's 5 different stages in every film. There's equilibrium, which is when the character is living their normal lives when the film starts. There's disruption. Then there's disruption. Yeah, disruption is the stage in which the character, for whatever reason, has to change from their normal life and live a life, or basically it's a stage where they stop living a normal life, or the life changes to something that they're not. That wasn't considered normal when the film started. Then there's recognition of disruption, which is the part in the film where they recognize as to why, who or what caused them to go from the equilibrium to the disruption stage. Attempt of resolution is the part in which they try to go back to the equilibrium. In action films, it's usually when they're planning to kill the villain or whatever, and then there's a return to equilibrium, which is finally when they do return to the equilibrium. Like in action films, it's when they finally kill the villain and go back to their normal life. Or finally, if some action films try to have a bit of a plot twist, so the plot twist could be that the protagonist dies as well. You know, a great example of this is a Terminator. Yeah, Terminator, where obviously there's many protagonists, so we're just going to focus mainly on the Terminator, which is, the character in Terminator 2, yeah, the Cyborg in Terminator 2. We're going to focus on both cyborgs in this case, because there's the other protagonists as well. But for example, in Terminator 2, the cyborg has to, after killing the enemy of the film, has to destroy himself. That can also count as the return to the equilibrium, because whilst the main character, whilst the Terminator is dead, the characters around him, around them, like the companions and stuff, return to their normal lives because they're no longer being threatened by the villain. So that's basically the 5 stages of narrative. Yeah, 5 stages of narrative. So yeah, that's narrative structures finished. So, the main story and subplot of a film. So that's basically, the main story is the main narrative of a film. It's the primary narrative in this case, and the subplot is usually considered to be the less important story, or is the part of the story which is less important than the primary, or you could just say the secondary narrative. Just say subplot. Just use the term subplot for the secondary narrative, and for the main narrative, it's just narrative, really. But that's basically what it is. A slightly great example that I could use is Highlander. It's a 1986 film which has not aged particularly well. It's cheesy, but it's the first time you watch a film, you're like, wow, this is a great film. The main narrative is the idea that in our world there are immortals who fight each other, so that one day the last remaining immortal can gain all the power in the world. Basically, can become the most powerful person and gain unimaginable superpowers, like the ability to read other people's thoughts. Sorry. Apologies for that. Anyway, the subplot in the film is about this. It's about the protagonist, Connor MacLeod, who is a Scottish person from the medieval times, and he, upon discovering in battle that he's immortal, he is banished from his hometown because they think he's a witch, and he and when he leaves his town and lives a new life, he falls in love with a woman, meets another immortal who teaches him how to defend himself against other malicious immortals. Basically teaches him how to survive and how to fight in the best way possible. And this protagonist, Connor MacLeod, eventually ends up outliving the love of his life, and he has to live with the fact that whoever he meets will die before he does, because he obviously he never dies. And it then the film he has to keep on fighting immortals, and then he ends up having to fight the last immortals left on this earth, or the last evil immortals left on this earth, and that's the subplot of the film. And also, yeah, he meets another girl in the film. Like, in the film is mainly set in 1980s New York, because that's where he ends up living in the future. In the future of, well, not in the future of the film, but that's where in his future he ends up living in 1980s New York. And basically he falls in love with another girl and kills all the nasty immortal people, and he becomes the last immortal alive. That's in the first film. If you've never seen that film, watch it and completely ignore the sequels. But do not even touch the sequels, because the sequels desecrate what the first film is. They just ruin the film even more. So that would be the subplot, yeah. The story of the main character, and the main plot is just, like I said, immortals living for a long time and fighting each other, so that ultimately one immortal can be the ultimate and most powerful person in the world. Yeah, that's basically what it is. So yeah, that's main story and subplot done. So resolution and enigma is usually it's basically not usually, it's basically by the end of the film, after the whole narrative structure has taken place, does the audience have any questions about the narrative or the characters? Mainly narrative. Characters can be, or it can be characters who have influenced the narrative structure itself. So, for example, in American Psycho, there's obviously Patrick Bateman, who is the main character. It's a great film, by the way. It's an amazing film. If you haven't seen it, watch it twice at least, because you will miss a part at the end very easily, and it's a very key part to the narrative. So basically, in the film, if you've seen it, you will realize that in many parts in the film, the characters get each other's names wrong. They don't really pay it. They are very clear that they don't. It's very clear in the film that they don't particularly care about who is who, and they often end up calling Patrick something like Paul. Paul is one of the other characters. When Patrick starts to dress like Paul, one of the other characters intentionally calls him Paul, thinking that he actually is Paul, or a different character. Yeah. In the final scene, throughout the film, the main character Patrick Bateman, when he's off work, he does a lot of killing. He murders a lot of people, And then at the end of the film, he talks to his lawyer, who early in the film, well, not early in the film, but early at the end of the film, calls his lawyer and basically confesses. Now, at the end of the film, he talks to his lawyer about the phone call and about the confession, and the lawyer pretends it's a joke. And after a while, after he's been talking to Patrick for a while, he makes it clear that the call, that the call, that he thinks the call was a joke, because one of the people who were supposed to be the victims, one of the people who Patrick says is dead. The lawyer claims that the guy is actually still alive, and that he has had a dinner with him in another place. Basically, that he's seen this person alive. So that's why he thinks that the phone call that Patrick made about him killing that person is just a joke. However, as you realize in the film, at the end of the film, when he's talking with the lawyer doesn't actually call him by his real name. I don't actually know what name exactly he calls him by. I don't think he calls him by his real name. Not too sure. I haven't seen the film in a long time, but throughout the film you realize that, like I said, the characters don't exactly remember each other's names and often mistake each other for other people. So at the end of the film, this is a huge topic for anybody who talks about this film. The enigma is, did those murders actually happen or not? That's basically where that's one of the most commonly reoccurring questions about the film itself. Did the murders actually happen? Some people believe that it didn't, and some people believe that it do. But when the film ends, it makes it very clear that the murders didn't happen. Now, I understand that there is a very unpopular sequel to American Psycho with Mila Kunis, who is the actress who does the voice of Meg in Family Guy. Now, the sequel was very much ignored upon release. It's a film that everybody, the few people who actually watch the film, want to forget the film because it's terrible. I've seen it. It's embarrassing. It's an embarrassing film. Even the actress herself is hugely embarrassed by the fact that she took part in the production of this film. She plays the protagonist, and the film basically says that yes, Patrick Bateman did kill a lot of people, but people tend to ignore the sequel because obviously the first film ends with a question which doesn't tell you whether the murders actually happened or not. So people tend to only focus on the first film and totally ignore the second film. So that's basically what Resolution and Enigma is. Another example I can use is well, I'm not too sure if I can use that as an example because that's more of a cliffhanger. That's more, I mean, I could try and use it like I could use a Flash Gordon, for example. If you've seen the original 1980s film, not the 1960s or the 1950s, I think, I'm not too sure, but there's a black and white version. I'm talking about the color adaptation, which was the 1980 cheesy film, by the way. It pretty much did terribly in the cinema. It has horrible acting. But anyway, at the end of the film, sorry if you actually heard me breathe there. The microphone is very sensitive, so I'm having to be a little bit careful. I might try and edit this a little bit, but anyway, at the end of the Flash Gordon film, you see it says the end, and then it doesn't. I'm not too sure if it says the end, but I know there's a part at the end after the main character Ming dies. You see the glove of his of one of his what do you call them, of one of his henchmen, could you say. You see the glove or the hand or of one of the bad guys reach out and grab the ring, which is supposed to be like a very powerful ring that Ming used to freeze his enemies. So that's basically look, that's more. So the question is, did the bad guy actually die? Is Flash Gordon gonna have to fight the next enemy? Though that's more of a cliffhanger though than that's not so much. I mean, that technically counts in my opinion. It does count as a good example for resolution and enigma. You just have to word it correctly and not go off the rails. But anyway, that's resolution and enigma done. So pre-title sequences and teasers. Teasers. Sorry, yeah. Teasers are trailers, if you don't know what that is. But anyway, pre-title sequences and teasers is what we're going to go into right now. This is still part of narrative. Teasers are obviously trailers that usually give audiences a rough idea of what narrative and atmosphere or tone they're going to get when they watch the film. It's basically promotion is what it is. It's promotion that shows audiences roughly what they might get. There's often a case right now where some people feel like trailers are telling the audiences too much about the film, so much that when they actually see the film, they feel disappointed because the trailers told them everything or most of what's important about the film. So obviously, had they not known what those important parts, they would have felt like it was maybe a surprise to them. And some audiences like surprises, some audiences don't. But long story short, trailers are for the purpose of telling the audience what they might get from the film before they actually watch it. Now, and then there's also closing / opening title sequences, which is usually in the introduction, mainly in the introduction of the film. In films like, this is mainly to do with scenes in the film that take place either before or right after the introduction of the film. A good example that I could use in this video would be Pirates of the Caribbean. I believe it's not Dead Man's Chest. It's the third film of the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. It's a great example. The World's End. Yeah, that's what it's called. It's called The World's End. Pirates of the Caribbean, The World's End. And in the pre-title sequence, there's a part where, obviously, if you've seen the film, you'll know this, but if you haven't, spoilers. Before the title starts, there's a scene where there's this tragic scene. It's very gloomy. It's very sort of depressing, and there are essentially prisoners being escorted. What did you call them? Being escorted to what you could call the hanging stage, or the yes, being escorted to their hanging. And one of the prisoners is actually a child, and in the scene you actually see as the child, they're all singing this very piratey song, and the child gets hung, and boom, the introduction rolls in, and Pirates of the Caribbean, the film has started. Yeah, so what example could I use as an after title sequence? Wait for a second. I've got a few films here that I might want to use as an example. I'm just going to check them out for a second. Well, for example, a great example that I could use for this is the first episode of the new Doctor Who series, which starts off directly by introducing you to what eventually will become the companion of the new Doctor. It doesn't start off with the protagonist, but it starts off with the helper, and it shows you the everyday life of this helper, but it does it in a very quick way. So 1 second it shows the helper waking up, having breakfast, and then boom, next thing you know, the helper's already on the bus. And then after you see the helper on the bus, you instantly see the helper hanging out with her friend, and then right after that it quickly cuts to the helper going to work. So it's very quick, a very speedy introduction into the helper's life. So it shows you that the episode is quite likely going to have a very fast pace story, a story that goes at a very fast pace, and that gives the audiences an introduction in, well, an understanding of what kind of episode they will be watching. I was just about to say film there, but obviously no, it's not a film, it's an episode. Usually films tend to always have, in many cases, have a pre-title sequence. I'm not too sure what other films I could use as an example for this. Nightmare on Elm Street, I believe, is an example. It's quite a possible example for the film. I haven't seen the film for a long time, but after the film introduction finishes, it instantly cuts to one of the nightmare sequences in which Freddy Krueger is haunting this teenage girl. It's very creepy. It's got these very weird, odd noises in the background. The protagonist, obviously, because they're in a nightmare, it often doesn't make sense. One passageway leads to a totally different. They don't know where they're gonna go. They don't know what way to go. They feel trapped, so it can be very. It's very claustrophobic. So it gives you an atmosphere or a rough understanding of what tone the film is going to have. So I feel like I pretty much just covered all the important parts of narrative. Here on the script over I've got a script here which says what I've got to go over, and the last part that we have to do is technical and cultural codes. However, because they also appear in language as well, I will not talk about them for now. I will leave that for a separate video. And unfortunately, due to how long this video already is, I will not be able to go into cover representation in this video. Apologies if this video is a little bit long, but I'm trying to make sure that I don't miss out any important details that I may need to go over. So the length of this video is only for the benefit of my audience. If it were for my benefit, I would obviously make the video a lot shorter and focus only on what I consider to be the very most important points. But there are other aspects which I talked about in this video that you could also use to your advantage. So yes, apologies for saying so many times. As you can sense, I'm a little bit nervous. That's mainly because I'm trying to make sure that I don't talk about things for too long. I did a previous recording of the category section, and it took me, oddly enough, it took me like 30 minutes to go over the thing, because I was often bumbling my words, mixing up my words, and having to correct myself, and yeah, so apologies if I do go off the rails a little bit or off track in this video. And again, apologies that I could not go over representations. That is a hugely important part in the series that I'm going in this series of videos. The very important part is representations. So apologies I couldn't go over it. However, hopefully you'll love this video. Even if you have enough time, or if you want to, please hit like and subscribe to my channel to get more informational videos on narrative, or just watch other videos I may do in the future for creative purposes, for different creative purposes, obviously. So peace out, ladies and gentlemen.